Oui, des sangs, filles de l'âme, filles des fire, oui, des fire.
Vandal Hearts is the story of Ash Lambert, an experienced military leader who's charged with the job of rooting out a government conspiracy and returning order to his homeland of Ishtaria. Released by Konami in 1997, Vandal Hearts was one of the first strategy role-playing games released during the dawn of the 32-bit era. Released in the USA on the PlayStation, Japan got a Saturn version as well. There are a lot of things that make Vandal Hearts a classic game. Its robust combat system, great dialogue, and excellent soundtrack only helped to cement its place within a small but rabid cult following. The game would spawn a sequel in 1999, titled simply Vandal Hearts 2, and later a downloadable prequel available on the PlayStation Network and Xbox Live. The game was challenging, making you think very carefully and weighing the pros and cons of every move. One of the things the game is most remembered for is its violence level. When enemies are killed, the player is treated to a bloody arterial spray effect before the enemy disappears from the playing field. Vandal Hearts has worked to pave the way for the SRPG genre here in the West, and has laid the groundwork for some excellent games that came after it, such as the Disgaea series on the PlayStation 2.
Soon, the end will come.
Do you remember the night you came here? You had to have noticed the signs.
What?
Didn't it feel like you were in a different time? That's the dark hour. We'd like you to lend us your strength.
A machine is created for a purpose.
Being a high school student can be hard. Being in high school during the day and fighting shadow demons at night is even harder. Thus was the arduous fate of our voiceless protagonist in Persona 3, released on the PlayStation 2 in 2007 by Atlus. Persona 3 was a huge game for the series, which, up until this point, was more of a sleeper hit in the West, until the breakthrough success of the third installment.
Something about the shadows.
That makes you all hypocrites. Said shut up.
Persona 3 was a game that just seemed to do everything right. Once picked up, it was almost impossible to put down. Blame this on the innovative friendship system, the stellar soundtrack, combining and building personas, or perhaps that even the grinding in Persona 3 was actually fun. Every time you play Persona 3, it becomes harder and harder to leave its charming, charismatic world.
You must accept your destiny.
Shall we begin?
Midnight's just around the corner.
Final Fantasy II was the game that changed the way we played Final Fantasy. With an expertly crafted character-driven narrative and fantastic dialogue, FF2 was the first in the series that played out a central story. No more wandering aimlessly while trying to figure out what to do or where to go next. Once the story grabbed you at the beginning, then you just went along for the ride. Out of the many games in the world-famous Final Fantasy series, FF2, or 4 as it's known in Japan, was the one that challenged the conventions of the typical role-playing game. It was released in 1991 as a launch title on Nintendo's Super NES, and its formula would set the standard for the RPGs of the future. With an amazing cast of heroes and one of the best and most memorable music scores in video game history, there's no doubt that Final Fantasy II is one of the best of all time. In 1995, Squaresoft released one of the greatest and most unique role-playing games in history, and it wasn't a Final Fantasy title, it was Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger proved to fans that Squaresoft wasn't just a one-trick pony, and set off to tell one of the most interesting and compelling stories in all of video gaming. With a lush and amazingly detailed art style courtesy of designer Akira Toriyama, and a legendary score co-written by none other than Uematsu himself, Chrono Trigger was destined for greatness and delivered on all fronts. Chrono Trigger exhibited the now famous time travel system, wherein the player could affect the history of the game world by performing actions in different time periods. It also came complete with multiple endings, and is one of the first RPGs to encourage the player to complete its side quests to further develop certain character stories. From a moving, yet equally humorous story and lovable characters, to its amazing graphics and innovative gameplay, it delivered to fans in spades. Chrono Trigger is without a doubt one of the greatest and most memorable role-playing games of all time, and many would say also one of the greatest games of all time. In 1995, Earthbound turned the world of RPGs on its head. Here was a game that was set in modern time with no medieval swords and sorcery or knights and dragons. Earthbound is the story of Ness and his oddball group of friends who were sent out on a mission to destroy the Gigas and save the world from destruction. Since the game was set in the fictional but modern town of Onett and its surrounding world, modern conveniences lend a unique perspective to typical RPG conventions. Need cash? Pull it out of an ATM. Need to save your game? Call your dad from a payphone. Need to get some health back? Get a pizza delivered. One of the other things that really separated Earthbound from the pack was its sense of humor. What other role-playing games thrust you into battles with hippies and cultists, and came with a strategy guide complete with scratch and sniff stickers? Its graphic style was simple and stylistic, and its music fit the mood of the game to a T. It's just as full of memorable tracks as any top-tier RPG. Earthbound wasn't a massive hit at first, it was ahead of its time. Over the years, Earthbound has managed to build a well-deserved fan base, and now commands extremely high prices online, even for just the cartridge alone. Earthbound was a breath of fresh air that still stands the test of time. It's an extremely ambitious game that reminded us that it was okay to laugh during an RPG, and for that, it's my #1 pick for the best role-playing game of all time.